from the oldest city in the USA, St. Augustine tonight, with our guest, Bruce Horovitz, Melissa Ross, Roger Bansemer, musical guests, the Obscure Brothers, and comic relief by Dave Red, and your host, Jorge Rivera.
And now, live from the oldest city in the United States, host of the St. Augustine Tonight Show, Jorge Rivera.
Here we are. Wow, I feel great. I feel like the caucuses in Iowa. Everything went really well. Everything went really well. But it's only Tuesday. They got the rest of the week to mourn. I wanted to thank everybody as usual. We have so many people, components of the show, from the outside, from the inside. You know, I wanted to bring someone who's been with us from the very beginning, a gentleman by the name of Dan Kosoff. And Dan has a lot of experience in television and was helping us, and he introduced me to one of my guests today, and he introduced me to two of my guests next week, and he's just been very instrumental. And he's struggling for his life, you know. He has one of those things where, you know, you got to keep going to the doctor, keep attacking it, and we're just hoping victory. Victory is the only answer. Let's give him a hand of applause. We love you, Dan. We're rooting for you. I also want to thank, what is it? It's called Sweet City Cupcakes. When you have dyslexia, you're always changing it. So I always give them a new name. And they provided the cupcakes for the buffet. Also, Bakersville, their bread for the buffet also. Theo, who gives us the furniture. Rod, who built the stage. We could go on and on with all the people who make a big difference. Always Pizza. I want to remind you also that we do sell the mug that we have up here with our guests. So, you know, support the show. Get yourself a mug. Feel like a star when you drink that coffee. Don't be afraid of that. I want to thank Aramac for the wonderful buffet. And, of course, give a hand to the Corazon. Here we are once again. Thank you. You know, I like to look at the news during the week, and I was watching something really interesting. Was they found these skeletons from Vesuvius, the volcano, Pompeii. And there was another city that was a little bit closer to the volcano. And they found the bodies like in a stone bath or something, which created the effect to bake them instantly. And they found one of the skulls was cracked, which 2 Advils are not going to help you. But the brain was glass. Wow. And now they're trying to figure out, is it something that got in there, or did the brain actually, because of the heat, that intense blast of heat, if it did that, because they found some other parts of the body that kind of glassified, if that's a word. So it's very, very, very interesting. Brexit, they're out. The British are out. Let's see what happens. I don't know. Will my chips and chips change or whatever? I don't know. Also, we lost Kobe, as you know, and that was heartbreaking. Another thing I saw in the news is Jacksonville is going to get its first carbon ion treatment center in about 2 or 3 years. Also, proton beam, which is a crazy technology to attack cancer cells, where you kill the bad ones and you keep the good ones. Germany's been doing it for 10 years, but it looks like we're catching up. And I think it'll be the first center in North America. They hope by 2022 start treating people there with tumors and cancers that are just resistant to everything else. Yeah. So let's hope on the best. Yes. Coronavirus. Oh my Lord, I mean, I think the only part of that story that I found interesting was a Chinese woman had a really big fight with her lover. And he just stormed out. And she was so angry. She wanted him back. So she calls the police and tells them he has the virus. So the police arrest him. They find out he doesn't have the virus. So she's in jail. So the things lovers do. I mean, that's called desperation at its best. And the last little piece of news I wanted to share with you is that they asked millennials what was the most important thing for them in their lives. And you would think marriage or career. No. Number one, debt-free. I want to be debt-free. And I thought, wow. Well, I guess they were watching their parents and everything with the mortgages, with the credit cards, with blah, 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 blah. So they want to be debt-free. And I thought that was, that was quite wise answer to the question. But tonight we're not debt-free. No, we are. We are debt-free. We have wonderful guests. And I'm going to bring up here the Obscure Brothers. Please, come up. Take your instrument. We're going to get ready. Today's show, as they get ready, let me tell you a little something. Today's show is like a tribute to Gamble Rogers. He was part of Florida. If anything was Florida, it was him. Folk music was his thing. We're going to talk about him. We have a guest who's talk about him. These gentlemen back here knew him very well. As you know, he died tragically in Flagler Beach trying to rescue a Canadian tourist. And he lost his life in that attempt. And so these gentlemen here knew him very well. So they've been invited. So Gamble, if you're anywhere up there, this is for you. So I leave you now with the Obscure Brothers.
Well, thank you. We're real happy to be here. This is my musical pal Bob over here. We're not actually brothers. He's actually my dad. I'm the straight man in you. No matter where we go. So anyway, we're going to start out within the Gamble theme. This is a tune that I wrote for Gamble. Oh, it's been a long time now, but I knew Gamble back in the 70s. He's the one that actually taught me this finger-style guitar picking, and so I wrote this little tribute for him. St. Augustine, and I feel as though I'm halfway in a dream. Old memories stroll by on parade like some transcendental promenade, and Gamble played that old guitar. Well, Charlotte Street just seems to make me blue, and it don't feel the way it did in '72. And I flash back to a time before when I was no trolled out the trade wind store, and Gamble played that old guitar. I close my eyes and it takes me where the smell of jasmine's in the air, and Gamble played that old guitar. He played us. Sang those songs and told those stories well, and we all laughed and cried. How could we ever tell that he'd leave us on that sandy shore where we'd all long to hear once more? Gamble played that old guitar. I close my eyes and it takes me where the smell of jasmine's in the air, and Gamble played that old guitar. He played this. Well, I can't hold it on the road when you're sitting right beside me, and I'm drunk out of my mind merely from the fact that you aren't here. Nowadays I've drifted far away from that that ancient city where I thought I'd stay. Yeah, but in my mind I oft return to the place where the hates and the vandals turn, and gamble play that old guitar. I close my eyes and it takes me where the smell of jasmine's in the air, and gamble play that old guitar. But as long as I can draw a breath, I know I never will forget when gamble played that old guitar. When gamble played that old guitar. When gamble played that old guitar. I wish I could hear Gamble just pick that old guitar. Just like bubbles on a dolphin's breath.
The Obscure Brothers, we're going to hear a lot from them later on. Thank you, guys. We'll be back after these messages.
At Martinez & Associates, we can help you with many things. Number one is income for life throughout your retirement, which is very important. Number two would be Medicare choices, which are very confusing. Number three is a legacy for your loved ones. And finally, keeping you independent throughout retirement. My name is Tuli Martinez. Call this number. Y hablamos español.
We're back, ladies and gentlemen. We're back. We're back with Bruce Horovitz. You write it with a V, not a W. I learned that quickly. And he wrote a book on Gamble Rogers. And I read this book, and I told him this. I read the prologue, and it was about a fantasy county that Gamble's talked about in his songs with all these characters that were very, very funny. He had an incredible sense of humor. And, I read the prologue, and it was about that, and fine. Then I read the book, and the book draws you in to get to know him so well, to feel for him through the book, that at the end of the book, I went back to the prologue, and I had tears in my eyes, because it had a whole different meaning now. And I have to tell you, this is your first book. I'm afraid now what you might write next, because this was just an incredible read, And if you want to read a wonderful book of someone who's from here, who's very much St. Augustine and this area, this is a wonderful book, wonderful book. So my question to you is, you're originally from this area. This is home. Yep. Florida's home.
I was born in Savannah, but I lived in Jacksonville since I was about 4 years old.
Wow. And what compelled you to write a book? Because your background is journalism.
Right.
You studied at Boston University, was it?
Boston University, back in the 70s when journalism was an honorable profession. I came from the days of Woodward and Bernstein and the TV show Lou Grant, and it was a very romantic profession, not recognizable today. But I was a music fan, and I had never seen Gamble Rogers. In fact, really didn't know anything about him. But I was introduced to him after his death by a very, very close friend in Crescent Beach, who one day came down and showed me a picture, very small Polaroid taken around 1937, of two babies in diapers. And he said, "Do you know who this is?" And I said, "No." He said, "This is me and Gamble Rogers." Well, it turned out that this gentleman was a former state representative, the Honorable Bruce McEwen, who has recently passed. And he was Gamble's closest childhood friend. And his father was a physician who delivered Gamble Rogers, and Gamble Rogers' father, who was a renowned architect, had built the McEwen home. So he started me on this journey to discover Gamble Rogers. I'd never seen him perform. I didn't know Gamble, but I was familiar, like so many people, with the name. I knew there was a music festival. I knew there was something magical about this man, but I didn't know anything about him. So my curiosity got to me. And I went to the library to look up everything I could look up and research about Gamble Rogers, and found virtually nothing. The internet had very little. And the more I started researching and the more I started hearing about this remarkable human being, and one of the first people I met was Bob Patterson, who was just up on the stage.
Right.
And Bob and I took a walk through St. Augustine near the lighthouse area where Gamble lived. And I didn't have any notes with me. We just walked for maybe about an hour or so, and I listened to Bob talk about Gamble. And it was after that conversation that I knew this was a story that had to be told. It was so magical. There were so many things that Gamble did. And I thought it was very important that people know about this wonderful person
Right.
who was a hero to Floridians.
Yeah, and he comes across, he's very tall. And
Yep.
all the pictures I saw, it was this tall man, a gentleman, a real gentleman.
Someone said he could have walked in from the set of Gone with the Wind.
Right.
He had that southern gentility
Yes.
about him.
Yes.
He was very charismatic.
Yes.
He had an unbelievable jaw.
Uh-huh.
And he had charisma. He eked charisma from the stage.
He could be a movie star. He could be a Rock Hudson. And it was very interesting reading in your book how he had this magic over the crowd. He could walk into like trade winds and everyone was just crazy. And he would go out there and just soothe them all and start with his humor and his guitar. And he'd tell these stories of this county called what,
Ocklawaha County.
County, and all these characters with Greek names and all sorts of stuff. Right. And there was something here on page, I think it was page 79. Let me see if my eyes betrayed me. And it was funny, something he wrote. He wrote, let Grandpa put on his glasses real quick here. Hold on.
While you're looking, I can tell you that he came up with Ocklawaha County because in his college years, he actually met William Faulkner at the University of Virginia. And Faulkner was a great influence on Gamble. And of course, Faulkner in his own writings created a mythical county, which was
Right.
the basis for many of his stories.
Right.
And so Gamble sort of honored Faulkner, and true to Faulkner's memory.
Now there's a story of how there's like 3 different versions.
There's all kinds of versions, folk versions as to how they actually met. And nobody knows the real story except for, of course, Gamble and Faulkner. But however they met, Gamble was attending the University of Virginia, and Faulkner was a scholar in residence at the time.
Right.
And there are various versions, but whatever happened, it's apparent that Gamble indicated that his heart was, he was studying architecture because that was the family pedigree. He was studying philosophy, history, but he really, his heart and soul were in music and writing. And I think that Faulkner sort of said, pursue your dreams, and that's kind of what happened. But one of the things that Gamble did do is that he learned from Faulkner that the very best stories are in your own backyard. And so Gamble took the experiences of his life in Winter Park and in the summers that he spent in the Coochie Valley in the Appalachian hills of Georgia and created this mythical county in Florida called Ocklawaha County. Right. And it was really named probably after the Ocklawaha River, which was something that was very, very important to Gamble. It still plays a very, very important role in Florida's ecological system. And so I think he really wanted Ocklawaha County to be named so that the name would be memorialized forever.
And what was very interesting is I didn't realize his family were architects, and they sort of built Winter Park. I mean, all these buildings have, their characteristics of their architecture.
No question. His father really was responsible for much of Rollins College and much of which you see in the beautiful city of Winter Park. His father also designed the Supreme Court the state Supreme Court in Tallahassee, Florida. So his grandfather was an architect, his brother was an architect, and so you can imagine in the 60s, here Gamble Rogers is growing up, a family of architects, and he goes off and becomes a folk singer, which was really very...
Lots of pressure.
It was a lot of pressure,
Lots of pressure.
But I think everyone came to understand that he was pursuing his dream, he was pursuing what he really wanted to do, and he did it his own way. He didn't seek fame and fortune. He was a folklorist through and through, and I think that comes through in his songs and in his stories. We talk about Ocklawaha County. There are people that really think it exists, but it was really a creation of Gamble. And he used to say that the county seat of Ocklawaha County was Bean Creek and Snipes Ford. And what he would say is that the people that lived there knew what everybody else was doing, but they'd read the papers in the morning just to find out who got caught. And so that's sort of how he envisioned Ocklawaha County, and the motto, of course, of the county was "Sorry is sorry does."
Right, and you also find out that he was on the Ed Sullivan Show.
Correct.
He was with the Serendipity Trio, touring the whole country, and the big thing to me too was that you mentioned in the book Bleecker and McDougal in the Village in New York. And he would constantly be in the Village playing. The folk was big. Joan Baez, what's the big guy, Dylan, and all these other, Harry Chapman. It goes on with all the people he ran into his life.
Yeah, well, he was struggling with making a decision of working in the family firm as an architect, which was expected of him. And he did take a stint at trying to do that. But on weekends and on long week vacations, he would go up to the village. He would travel the country playing the folk circuit because that was really his passion. And eventually he landed a job with the Serendipity Singers and ended up on the Ed Sullivan Show, and then realized that he had so much to offer as an individual. So he came back to Florida and really created this whole genre of Gamble Rogers music and storytelling.
Well, there's a funny part where he decides to take a shot at architecture, and he heads out to Boston, and he never makes it to Boston.
Right. He was on his way to Boston. He was familiar with the music scene there. He felt he could practice architecture and moonlight in Boston, away from the pressures of the family. And he stops off in Greenwich Village. And at the time, the Serendipity Singers, which was a folk ensemble, was having an audition. And Gamble just wowed him with his guitar playing and his ability, and they hired him right on the spot. And he never made it to Boston. And the next thing you know, he's practicing to be on the Ed Sullivan Show with this group of
It's funny,
singers.
yes. He calls his brother, and then he calls his wife, and he said,
"This is
I
it.
never made it to Boston, I'm staying.
This is it.
This is what I'm going to do." But that little quote that showed how funny it was a story he was writing, and it goes something like, the character's called Agamemnon, like one of the one of the Greek warriors of the Iliad, I believe. His wife, Elfrida, had his ashes scattered over his favorite catfish hole on the Chattahoochee River. She saved enough of his ashes to fill a tiny hourglass, keeps it on the back of the stove, uses it for an egg timer. She always said that even at his best, Agamemnon was never good for more than 3 minutes. I thought that was so much him.
What was so brilliant about Gamble's act is that he would tell stories like that and then whip the guitar back in front of him and pick these unbelievable melodies, sort of like you heard Charley Simmons do. Just pick the guitar in such beautiful style. And then he would go back and tell another story and then sing a beautiful ballad. His act was a rapid-fire act. It barely gave the audience a chance to respond. He was so quick. So he just was the ultimate performer, storyteller. But what really distinguished Gamble was his humanity. He was an unbelievable human being. He gave of himself in so many ways that people don't know about, very understated. He never would have wanted a book written about him. He never would have wanted all these festivals and things named about him. He would have said, give it to the next guy. But he really gave of himself in so many ways.
Even with the little money he had, he was always bailing out other musicians who just drank too much and ended up in the slammer, and he'd go in there and bail them out.
He was the go-to person for the folk movement in the 70s and 80s in Florida, and he had many friends who did enjoy drinking and did enjoy the lifestyle, and Gamble was always there for his friends.
Right, I think it was MacLean, the one who, when he got drunk, he would give his things away.
Yeah, Will McLean was a good friend of Gamble's.
And he needed, of course, he didn't have a guitar because he gave it away, and he goes to a guitar shop, and the guy says, well, I'm a friend of Gamble, so the man of the store calls Gamble. He said, well, he's a great friend, but if you give him a guitar, he might give it away. And he gave him the guitar anyway, and the guy did return it, but it was so funny. He was so transparent all the time. He was just always telling the truth. And I think the thing was the sadness when he dies in this attempt to save a tourist. And he had a terrible disease as a young man.
Well, he suffered from a form of juvenile arthritis that really plagued him the rest of his life, and there was always the danger that his spine would fuse, and so he was very limited in his movements. Those that saw him perform would notice that he would have to turn his body completely to make a movement, and so while he was athletic and was a strong person, he certainly didn't have the mobility to be able to swim. But when this teenager came running up to Gamble and to indicate that her father was in trouble in the surf off Flagler Beach, Gamble never hesitated. And he stripped down to his underwear and a t-shirt and actually blew up a raft that was next to him and went into the ocean and tried to rescue this individual who he didn't know who it was. It was a total stranger. And of course we all know what happened. And it was really heroic. I think Gamble's friends knew that was the decision. Gamble had no choice. This is what he was going to do as a human being. And it is sad that there was no farewell concert, there was no chance to tell his family goodbye, no chance to receive the accolades and the things that he was so deserving of. But it sort of defined Gamble. I think Bob Patterson said it best when he said, we all knew that one day Gamble's life would end in some type of heroic fashion.
And it's so interesting that so many people had like this premonition, like he was starting, suddenly out of nowhere, he started getting everything together.
Right.
His daughter also saw him and felt she had seen him for the last time.
Right.
Sam Passetti also says he was a young man. And a lot of you know Sam Passetti, the musician. I invited him to come to the show. I don't know if he's out there or not. But, you know, he was 15 or something like that. And Gamble put his hand on his shoulder and said something to him that he felt it was so out of, it's going to be okay. It's going to be all right. And he thought that was like, why is he saying this? And then shortly after. And he dies a year after his father and all these other great musicians.
Right. His father passed away a year before.
Yeah, October.
And Gamble delivered the eulogy, which is this most touching but yet prophetic eulogy called My Father Was a Voyager. And in this eulogy, he talks about being with his father, and his father pointing to a nor'easter happening out in the Atlantic Ocean and asking him, what would you do if you got caught out in a surf like that? And it's this terror that comes over him, and he does this beautiful, poignant eulogy, and lo and behold, a year later, Gamble's in the surf, and this is what happens. Yes. So there are many people, Gamble had so many amazing qualities. He was so intuitive to people, and he was probably very prophetic in terms of the future. He probably had some sense.
Now, after you put a book like this, it takes you several years to put a book like this together, and you're able to finish it and take a deep breath. What do you think was the impact he left on you?
Well, for me, it was amazing because I never saw Gamble perform. I didn't know him. So I was discovering him for the first time. And for me, it was inspirational. It was something that I found myself totally immersed in his life. I became immersed in his music, his stories. I wanted to know everything I could know about him because we are in such need of heroes today. Right. And Gamble, to me, is a hero. He stood for everything that was right. You know, people sometimes ask, well, tell me something bad about Gamble, or tell me something. Everybody's got their stories. And literally, there's so many people that I spoke to about this book that there was nothing really bad to say. They all looked at him as a role model and somebody that they all aspired to be like. So it was inspirational for me, and probably the best thing is the fact that I see his name out there now, and I go on speaking engagements, and I'm able to go to bookstores and so forth and have people like me discover, like you, discover Gamble Rogers, who may have known the name, but really didn't know.
I cover the festival all the time, and I said, well, he must have been famous.
And there's the state park, which so many people don't know. You know, the state park was named after him, and people don't know. So to me, it's important that his story be out there, and that's a tremendous sense of satisfaction.
Well, this book's taken 2 awards already. It's just kicking butt. And I'm going to end it with, I go back to the prologue where all the characters of this fantasy county realize he's gone. And it's a beautiful prologue. And it ends with the words, when your work speaks for itself, don't interrupt. And beautiful work, my brother.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. When we come back, Melissa Ross.
At St. Augustine Distillery, we're part of a new generation of American craft distillers. Family owned and operated, we are committed to making the best possible spirits using local agriculture. Our distillers make everything by hand, from mashing and blending to distilling and tasting each and every batch. We distill and bottle everything we sell, making sure that the spirits are just right before barreling and aging. Bottled by real people, we love showing our guests not only what we do, but why we do it. We're passionate about educating our guests to not only what goes into each bottle, but how to make the best possible cocktails. We love St. Augustine, and thanks to your purchases, we're able to give back to the community and help local organizations each and every day.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you for your support.
St. Augustine Distillery, handmade with pride in the nation's oldest city.
So, wow, here I am with
Here we
Melissa
are.
Ross
Hi.
in her studio. Oh, my Lord. So this is, I hear you on the radio, and you always imagine, you have your own visualization.
Right, of what people look like.
Oh, yeah, what you look like, what the guests look like, and what the studio
looks like.
I love it. It has a New York feel, West Side. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of, that's good. That's good. I'm glad you feel that it's that way.
Yeah, I grew up in New York City.
Uh-huh.
So I thank you so much for being on the show.
Sure.
And I know the audience is watching us here at the Corazon, and for you to be so kind to give us your time. So I just wanted to start where were you born? Where did you grow up?
I was born in Denver, Colorado, outside of Denver.
Mm-hmm.
My dad went to the Air Force Academy, and after that, he was in Colorado for a while. It's in Colorado Springs.
Okay.
And so I was born in Colorado, even though I don't remember it at all.
Uh-huh.
I was an Air Force brat. I grew up on a bunch of different military bases.
Wow.
As my dad was moved all over the country.
So you were moving all over the United States?
As a kid, and then we were transferred when I was still in elementary school to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base outside of Dayton, Ohio.
Okay.
And we ended up staying there. So that's really where I grew up, Dayton, Ohio.
So when, oh wow. So
Yeah.
so when you think of the childhood that really stays continuous for a while, this is where you were.
Yeah.
Now, when you were in high school, did you gravitate to anything? Were you in the debate club? Or did you want to be the next Picasso? What was going on?
I didn't want to be the next Picasso. At the time, I wanted to be the next Jessica Savage.
Oh, wow.
Because she was the only person that looked like me that was on the news at that time.
All right.
And there weren't a lot of female role models like that. She was one that I remember, although later, we learned she really wasn't the best role model.
Yes.
But she was still a trailblazer in television news for women. And so when I was in high school, I was one of the editors of the school paper, and I anchored our little closed circuit newscast that we had in our high school. And then I went to college to study journalism and communication.
Wow. So you knew already journalism was pulling
I think by the time I was in high school that I thought that's what I want to do.
I'll be the next Lois Lane. I might meet Superman. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's cool. So then when you make your decision to go to college, what was the place you picked to go to college?
I went to Northwestern University, which has a good journalism program.
Good football game.
They used to have a terrible football team, and now they actually kind of have a good one.
They're competing, yes.
When we were in college, we would go to games, and we would always lose the games, and we would chant this stuff like, "That's all right, that's okay, you're going to work for us someday." They had all these chants because our football team was just so bad.
Yes.
And, we were known then more for academics, but it was great because Northwestern is in Evanston, which is an L right away from Chicago.
Okay.
So that was my first real exposure to Chicago, and I loved it.
Chicago.
And then I ended up moving back to Chicago and working at a television station there for years. So it's a great town.
The only bad thing in Chicago is that winter.
That's right.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Everything else is great.
You don't miss it from New York either, do you?
Well, but Chicago gets that wind off those lakes.
It's nightmarish, yeah.
I lived 4 years by Lake Ontario in Rochester, New York, when I was in my early 20s. And yeah, I had Chicago winters, snow.
Oh, it's like a knife cutting through you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So now, what are you actually doing in Chicago now? What is your job there?
I worked, after I graduated college, I went into TV news. So I worked at stations all over the country. I started in my hometown of Dayton.
Okay.
Then I went to Lexington, Kentucky, then Cincinnati, then
Still
Chicago.
In TV? Wow.
And then Orlando. And then the last TV job I had was here in Jacksonville. And by that point, I had kind of decided, okay, I think I'm done with this game.
I was going to say, TV,
it got old, and once you have a family, your priorities change.
Yes.
So I got out of that business, and I was doing other things. And then a few years after I got out, out of the blue, I got asked one day to apply for this job. And I thought, they're not going to give me that job. I'm not even on the air anymore.
Oh, right.
So I never thought I'd be back doing this kind of work, but here I am.
How long you been doing this now?
10 years.
And now you not only do you do the the morning show, but now you have the roundtable show too.
That's right.
Yeah, I love that.
Thanks.
I love
yeah.
that.
We're excited about it. So we do First Coast Connect every morning at 9, which is local.
And that's what wakes me up in the morning, because I
Thanks.
go to bed around 3 in the morning.
Oh.
I'm always editing.
You're a night owl.
Yes.
Well, I'm glad you get up with us. And then on Friday at noon, we have a show that's heard all over Florida, and we take calls from across the state, and it's called the Florida Roundup. And I co-host that one with my counterpart, Tom Hudson, at WLRN in Miami. So that's cool because it's a collaboration between WJCT, WLRN, and actually public radio stations across Florida.
Okay.
So it's a way to kind of knit the state together and look at the biggest issues in the state every week.
Right.
And now that we're heading into an election year, and Florida is going to be an important swing state, I'm hopeful that we can get some of the presidential candidates on the show this year.
That would be great.
It would be great.
We're trying to get Mr. DeSantis on our St. Augustine Tonight.
Yeah.
We've had Sidney Stevenson. We've had someone like you. Let's see. He's from this area.
Yeah, why not?
This is home. Why not? And you know, we don't bring people, at least at my show, to embarrass them or sacrifice them to a pagan god. We just have regular questions. Like, who are you? Now, here's a question for you. In this job you're doing now, what do you think is the most challenging thing?
I would say just managing all the moving parts, you know, there's a lot of balls in the air all the time. And so you're just booking a lot of segments, you're juggling a lot of different people and organizations and in pieces of information.
Right.
So you kind of have to be good at logistics.
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot of logistical work that goes into this that might not seem obvious.
I see your assistant always moving around, always doing this, always that. I've ran into her a couple of times. And then, of course, you're the general. She's the one that has to go execute.
She's actually a co-general, but
I need this, I need that. You know? I was an actor, and I used to do screenings in New York and stuff like that. So logistics. Now, what do you think is the most rewarding thing that you just feel good about?
It's just honestly the energy of all the people that you interact with. Because this has been an incredible opportunity to just get to know some amazing people, really. And in the 10 years I've been doing this work, I have met a huge range of fascinating and incredible people.
Okay.
And every day is different. Every day you get to meet somebody new.
Yeah, put you on the spot. Who's the most interesting so far? Or at least some of them. What would you say?
Sure. It's hard to name just one.
Right.
I'll tell you though, I always come back to this one interview. Early in my tenure in this job, I interviewed a guy named Casey. And he was one of the passengers on the flight that went into the Hudson River, the Miracle on the Hudson.
Oh, yes, Sully.
And he was a local executive who worked for Merrill Lynch and was on that flight and went into the water and was rescued by the captain, Chelsea Sullenberger.
Wow.
And he joined with some of the other passengers to write a book about their experiences called Miracle on the Hudson. And so one of the things I remember about that interview is that he was striking in the way he talked about how that experience completely changed not only his life, but the lives of everyone that survived.
Wow.
Because they felt as though they were completely different people after the crash than they were before.
Right.
And it was just so interesting to listen to him explain the journey that he had gone through in that experience. And it was just a reminder to me that you just can't take anything for granted in this life.
Yes.
You have to treasure every moment.
Yes.
Because
that's interesting you say that, because after 9/11, so many people got divorced and so many people got married.
That's right.
Because they realized
what's really important.
This is not a dress rehearsal.
That's right.
This is it. The curtain's open. Am I happy? Am I moving in the direction I need to move my life? That is so cool.
Yeah.
But what do you do when you want to relax, man? You get away from the mic.
You know, I just had 2 weeks off between Christmas and New Year's, which was great. First time I ever took that long of a vacation, I think, ever.
Wow.
And, you know, I didn't do a lot.
Could you chill?
Yeah,
Some
I chilled.
people can't chill, man.
I always used to say, you know, I have no chill. But I had chill this time. I really did. I did some baking. I did some going out with friends. I watched some shows that I'd recorded. And I just kind of hung out with the family, and it was good.
Wow. Now, looking into the future, you got this gig. It's a great gig, man.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see in the future, if you see anything?
You know what? I'm open to whatever happens. I love doing this, so I hope I get to keep doing it for as long as they'll have me, and I hope we can keep growing our platforms.
So when you're a little old lady, you'll be like Larry King on some little cable show.
Well, you know, that said, here's the thing. You also have to have a sense of timing.
Right.
I mean, you and I were talking earlier about Johnny Carson and how you grew up watching him. Well, I think he timed his exit pretty well.
Yes. He's magnificent. It's like boxers.
You need to know when it's time to leave the stage.
Yes.
So that's something that's in my mind
Don't get knocked out
too.
in the ring as your last fight.
That's right. You need to
leave with the crown, baby.
Exactly. So that's in my mind too.
Wow, wow. So I thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
this time. I know you're busy, and I'm a big fan. I listen to you every morning, and it's so funny. I'll say, "Hey, that's Giorgio. Hey, that's the mayor. Hey, this is this person from this or Lee Court with her little talking about people she brings from the food world." So thank you so much. You are really an oasis for us in St. Augustine.
Thank you.
Because a city that is so active at so many levels gets such little coverage, and you are that oasis, my friend.
We'll keep trying to do that, and if you want to shoot me some ideas, please do that.
All right. You heard it here first. Okay.
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yay.
Good.
Last year in January. Everything from the German farmer bread, the Schwarzwälder Flosserbrot. We have Jewish roots as well on my mother's side, so we do challah every Friday. That's available.
And I leave you once again with the Obscure Brothers.
Yeah, thank you. So we're going to do another Gamble Rogers tune and keep it with that little theme we got going. And this is, I always like to think about this song when I used to hear Gamble play this in the trade winds. It was, I don't think you could find a more suitable song to play in the trade winds than this thing. It's called Black Label Blues. A cabaret on my highway. Oh, the time is 10 to 2. A pretty waitress at my table. A pretty waitress at my table. She says, "What can I do for you?" I said, "Now baby, I'm so lonesome. Yeah, my mind is ill at ease. I need a woman, yeah, to hold me. Yes, but if you cannot love me, then Jack Daniels, if you please. Whiskey more, oh, whiskey more. Here's a fear, pain, and sorrow, Jack Daniels, if you please." So I called on Miss Maggie Gentry. Oh, I fell down on my knees. Maggie, darling, I need some loving. Yeah, deep, deep down in my dark old soul. Won't you set my mind at ease? She said, across my knees. I'm gonna squeeze you, yeah, tease you, yeah, but there's one thing I gotta ask for first. What's that, Mama? Jack Daniels, if you please. Whiskey and water, whoa, whoa, whiskey and water. Here's the fear, pain, and sorrow, Jack Daniels, if you fear and pain and sorrow, Jack Daniels. Take this fear, pain, and sorrow and give me some Jack Daniels here.
Stay right there, guys. Stay right there. Got me there, camera? So, let me not block you. Got me? Can you crop me in? All right. So, Obscure Brothers. Why Obscure Brothers?
Well, Bob and I play a regular gig over at O.C. White's every Thursday, and we were setting up one night to play. And a young fellow, I say that a lot of people look young to me now, but a young fellow, I guess maybe early 20s, came up while we were setting up. He says, "Oh, you guys going to play?" "Oh, yeah, we thought we might." He says, "That's cool, man. I bet you play some really obscure stuff like 70s rock and stuff." And Bob and I looked at each other and said, "Well, no, we're a little bit more obscure than that, but the name fits." So.
Okay. Now you both met Gamble Rogers, and Charlie, he really changed your way of playing guitar, did he, when you first encountered him?
Yes, he did totally. I moved down to St. Augustine when I was 21 years old, and I walked into the trade winds, and I was a young guitar player, pretty cocky, full of myself, and I realized this guy on the stage playing. I realized that I did not know anything about playing guitar.
And he saw you. You were watching him very closely.
Yes, I came back night after night after night, and on it went for a couple of years. And finally, one night I'm there taking up my usual position up front, and he came off the stage on break, and he handed me his guitar. He said, "Here, let me hear those licks you've been snitching." So he put me on the spot, and I told him, I'd probably spend a couple of $3,000 in beer, and it really slowed my learning down. But he said, "Well, all you had to do is ask, just come over to the house." So that's what I did.
And Bob, how did you run into Gamble Rogers?
I got out of the Navy in 1967, started to tour the country as a traveling musician and ran out of money here in St. Augustine. Spent my first night sleeping out on the beach. Heard about this place in town called the Trade Winds Tropical Saloon where I might find a gig. So I went in there that night, did an audition, and make a long story short, at the end of the night I had a gig playing 6 nights a week for the next 6 weeks.
Wow.
And I'm standing at the bar drinking a rum and coke with the owners of the bar, and somebody taps me on the shoulder. I turn around, there's 2 guys standing there. One of them goes, "Howdy, Bob, I'm Gamble Rogers, this is my friend Will McLean." Both of them in the Florida Artists Hall of Fame. They became lifelong friends.
Wow, yeah. Wow. Well, let's give them a hand, and we'll hear from them again when we come back. And we're setting up for Dave Red. He's going to make you laugh. Come on, Dave. I want to introduce another comedian out there struggling, facing the gladiators out here. Dave Red, I saw him, and he made me laugh a lot. And so let me do the joke test here. All right, let's see if the mic can handle jokes. I ate a clock last night. It was very time consuming. All right. It's all yours, buddy.
Thank you. I don't know if I can beat that. That's just too much to start with already. No, thank you guys very much. St. Augustine, this is great. We even have our own Tonight Show, right? I mean, it's fantastic here. I'm not a native St. Augustine guy. I moved here about 3 years ago, and I do love it here. I think I really like it because the older crowd makes me feel young. The younger people make me feel financially secure. It's a pretty good combination for me. I think the worst part about being a community college science instructor in St. Augustine, though, is that I look pretty much exactly like I should be a community college science instructor living in St. Augustine, It's also not the greatest paying job in the world. I got pulled over on my way to work a couple weeks ago. Cop stopped me for allegedly speeding, and he asked me where I was going in such a hurry, and I told him where I worked. And he said, "Now I know you don't have any extra money for a ticket, so I'm going to let you go with a warning." which is a rough, an interesting way to start your day. It's both good and bad. But if there's any other teachers out there, good news, we now get out of occasional tickets in addition to that 10% off at Staples once a year. So it's the benefits are fantastic. They're really great. We're getting later in the school year now for me, and at this point, a lot of the students start to get a little too familiar with me by this time. So earlier this week, I walked into class, and this kid just says, "Hey, homeboy," right? And I had to remind him of our relative positions here. It's Professor Homeboy. Thank you very much. I didn't spend 7 years on those streets just to be a regular homeboy, That was tough, yeah. One of them recently told me that she is a gluten for punishment, not a glutton for punishment. And now I'm left trying to decide if she has like celiac disease and a really clever command of English, or just neither. I'm going to go with neither. There's a student I have this semester who is really fond of his ability in lab to stop the stopwatch at exactly 10.00 seconds, right? Shows everybody, does it again. And eventually, I guess I'm starting to feel more paternal, and I had to pull him aside and say, "Look, son, you don't want your campus reputation to be Mr. 10 Seconds Flat." I mean, I know I had to transfer twice because of it. It was rough being me, I get a lot of excuses in my job, though. I recently gave a test and a student didn't show up, and then he came to tell me why he wasn't there for the test, and he told me that he had to rush his girlfriend to the emergency room. And there is just no way this kid has a girlfriend. There's just no chance, I don't go out of my way. I don't tell them that I do comedy, but they usually find out. St. Augustine is a small town, as you all well know. We pretty much have like craft donut shops and rumors. That's pretty much what we have here. So they find out, and recently one of them did, and it is one that really hates me, right? We get along generally, but this particular student really doesn't like me, and he found out. And I was returning tests, and while I was doing that, he said, "So I heard you think you're going to be a comedian." And he hadn't done that well on the test, and it was a good opportunity for me to hand it back and say, "I heard you thought you were going to be an engineer." Yeah, that was a good day. I'm glad you people hate children too. It works out for us. I did get the worst test answer that I've ever gotten recently. I asked them, I mentioned that I teach science classes there, physics specifically, and I asked them to draw and describe the 3 common states of matter, solid, liquid, gas, and they're supposed to draw like little atoms connected by different types of bonds in the different cases, and that's mostly what I got. But there was one test that was these 3 irregular, like closed-in shapes, and inside there were letters, and they were GA, TN, and TX. And when I looked closer at the shapes, I realized that they were the states of Georgia, Tennessee, and Texas. So I think the student took the test question to ask, what are the 3 states that do matter, not the 3 states of matter, which is really bad. But I think the worst part of that, after I thought about it, the worst part is that someone thinks Tennessee matters, which is clearly not the case, Yeah. In other news, I did just celebrate my 1-year wedding anniversary, which was great. Oh, thank you. That's great. Much better reaction than our family. That's pretty good. We went on a cruise, 7 nights, 8 pounds, right? The buffet was excellent. We did a lot of touristy stuff that I've never done before. Like we took a helicopter ride for the first time, and I got like a real massage for the first time, and it was really great. And I think it was when we were going down the world's 2nd longest zip line that I thought to myself, why did I wait so long in life to marry someone that makes so much more money than I do? And pay for this stuff. It was a good trip. The anniversary was also a good occasion, though, for us to look back and look at the wedding pictures, of course. And my wife planned the whole thing. She did a great job. Looking back, I was not much help in planning it, right? So I tried. I remember driving one day and asking her, "Honey, did you decide on what colors you want for the wedding?" And she said, "Yeah, blue and gray." And all I could think to say was, nothing says the start of a peaceful union like choosing the colors of the Civil War combatants, I guess I'll be blue and you can just yell states' rights every time we get into a fight, Which is pretty much how it's gone. I think it's interesting that marriage has been around for so long, and we have only just recently come up with the term microaggression in society, because there's a lot of little aggressions in my house at this point. And a lot of it's me, honestly. Recently I felt compelled to open up the dishwasher, rearrange it the way that I think it should be, right? And then leave it cracked open so that she could see the right way to arrange a dishwasher. I know. So it turns out that some of my student evaluations in the past have been correct, and I really can be quite a jerk, I think it's important, though, when you marry someone to pick someone that, can balance you out, that has strengths where you're weak and vice versa. Like, I'm not particularly good at arguing over money or getting the manager involved when needed, so I married a white woman named Karen. And she takes care of all that for me. It works out really well. Yeah. It's, like I mentioned, we've been married for a year now, and so the question has started to come up, are you guys going to have kids? And I think it's good timing for us, because if you look at me, it seems pretty clear that in 6 to 8 years, I'm going to need help with my phone. So I think that would be a good timing thing for us. And I'm probably going to need help with a lot of stuff, like the way I help my mom with things too. Like recently I had a conversation with my mom where I had to explain to her the difference between a butt dial and a booty call, right? Because like on paper, those translate pretty much one-to-one, but in practice they're really not the same thing. I don't know, so you guys think we should have a kid?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, it doesn't matter because we are, right? So the baby's due in about a month, so we are going to, thank you, yeah, so we're going to have a baby. So I'm going to be a father for the first time, and that's of course, a little bit daunting, and it's natural for me to look back and see the way I was raised and that kind of thing. So my paternal role model was my stepfather, and I'm very happy with him, but there are some things about how he parented that I don't think are going to translate today. Like, just as an example, when I was about 4, I reached for what I thought was a tomato, and he knew was a really hot pepper. And his method of letting me learn stuff was to just find out for myself. And then when I would cry after something like that, he would always say, "What's wrong, Nancy? Can't find your purse? What's wrong, Nancy? Can't find your ballet shoes?" Right, so that's parenting in 1980. And there's at least 2 reasons why if I parent that way, people are going to call Child Protective Services, right? And there's probably a third way that we haven't discovered yet as a society. So I don't think I can do things quite his way. But he has moved along with the times very nicely. Like he was just down here for Christmas, and he's in his mid-70s now. And my wife and I got him to try sushi, and we got him a tablet. So new technology, new food, that's a big day. So he's trying the sushi, and I'm setting up his first ever email account. He's never had email before. And he looks down at the sushi, and he says, "I didn't know that sushi came with avocado," and reaches for the wasabi. And I remembered that day with the pepper. And I was like, well, this circle of life is working out great at this point, So I let him find out what wasabi is. And if you want to verify that story, I was setting up his first ever email account, so you can contact him at nancysrevenge@gmail.com. And he will get back to you eventually. All right, you guys, thank you very much. That was my time for the evening. Let's get Jorge back up here. Thank you.
David Red, you killed it, my brother. Thank you. When we come back, our third guest, super interesting.
At St. Augustine Distillery, we're part of a new generation of American craft distillers. Family owned and operated, we are committed to making the best possible spirits using local agriculture. Our distillers make everything by hand, from mashing and blending to distilling and tasting each and every batch. We distill and bottle everything we sell, making sure that the spirits are just right before barreling and aging. Bottled by real people, we love showing our guests not only what we do, but why we do it. We're passionate about educating our guests to not only what goes into each bottle, but how to make the best possible cocktails. We love St. Augustine, and thanks to your purchases, we're able to give back to the community and help local organizations each and every day.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you for your support.
St. Augustine Distillery, handmade with pride in the nation's oldest city.
Back, ladies and gentlemen. We're back here with a brief slider. I call this a slider. It's a 3-minute moment, and I bring people who have things happening in the community or nearby, and I have these gentlemen who are involved with the Jaguar Legends. And go ahead, state your names.
So I'm Tony Gardner.
I'm Jonathan Fichter.
And we are co-founders for the Jaguar Football Legends here in Jacksonville, Florida.
Okay. And What is the, this is a nonprofit organization?
This is actually a for-profit organization, but we donate a good proceed to the Foster Closet organization. We support them on every event that we do.
And the Foster Closet organization is what?
So the Foster Closet, the Foster Closet organization, they support a lot of the foster kids. They have a building out in Jacksonville, Florida. The McGuire family has been doing it now for quite a while. You definitely go on the Foster Closet's website. We support a lot of things they do. They provide toiletries, they provide some housing, just about everything you need when you're in foster programs.
Okay. Now, Tony and John, Johnny, yes. Johnny, the Jaguar, you're known as the biggest Jaguar fan on the planet. But
yeah, that's what the news calls me.
Yes, you're everything that's Jaguars. Now, the Jaguar Legends, what else? It has a mentor program also, doesn't it?
Right, so you can go onto the website and book. We got about 50 people on the roster, ex-players, that if you have a son or a daughter that wants to get mentored by these players, we can come up with something and work on prices and how long it's to be, a week or a month or whatever. But it gives the average kids and then the average person, you have the ability to be around these celebrities and get the mentorship and how they got to the pros compared to a lot of people who never got the opportunity to.
Wow. Well, I thank you guys. It's great to see an organization like the Jaguars and the players as they retire, and as, some of them are players and active. They're giving back to the community. And I thank you so much for being here and sharing that with us.
Before we leave, just please go on the website. It's jaguarfootballlegends.com. And if you see any of us, myself and John, we're out in the public a lot. And a lot of times if you have kids in sports, just grab us sometime and let us know about your event. Sometimes we'll just show up.
And Tony's the project manager, so he's very much involved, and so is Johnny. So they're co-founders, and I thank you so much.
Let's give them a hand.
Hi, my name's Dana. I own Sweet City Cupcakes, and we're located at 233 West King Street. We specialize in custom cakes and cupcakes. We use fresh and local ingredients and bake fresh daily. Each of our cupcakes is decorated with a unique look to complement the flavor. We have signature cupcakes such as the Marilyn, the Elvis, the I Love Lucy. We have a unique vintage look. Stop in and say hello. Have a cup of coffee and a delicious cupcake. Even better yet, take the box home to share with the family.
We're back, ladies and gentlemen. We're back with Roger Bansemer, and well, we talked a lot. We met twice, and you're fascinating in so many different ways. And one of our people, Bernadette Rivelle, who does our digital media, is a big fan and watches your program. For those who don't know about the program, Roger and his wife Sarah have a program called Painting and Travel, which is on PBS. It's been on for about 13 seasons, and they're planning another season coming soon. So when you were young, I remember you were telling me you started by painting, as a boy, small signs for merchants in your community.
Yeah, that's really how I got started. I was in the 6th grade, and there was a grocery store that I went in with my mom, and the owner of the grocery store painted his own signs, like, bacon 39 cents a pound. And she said, my son could paint as well as that. And he gave me some paints and some paper, and I started painting signs. And I continued as a sign painter for many years, all the way through college. Painted my way through college.
So it was making you money?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a very good profession. I loved sign painting, but I always sort of wanted to be a painter.
And this is it. When it suddenly comes the thing where you say, well, the sign painting is okay. I am making money, but I'd like to move into something like this, which is fine artist, realism. And I had said that to you in our conversation. It's not a choice you make. There's a whole ritual. There's a whole philosophy. There's a lifestyle with it.
Well, there is. people say, and I've probably done 10,000 paintings, seriously. We have over 1,000 paintings in our studio right now.
Wow.
But, you know, it's not so much hard work, it's showing up for work. That's what you have to do to be a painter. You have to really show up for work every day, you know. And as a sign painter, I always loved that, but wanting to be a painter, I've gradually sort of weaned myself off the sign painting and did more artwork. So as the sign painting sort of decreased, the artwork.
So you started turning down jobs in order to spend more time perfecting this new medium that you were pursuing.
And art brought me to a lot of different, you know, aspects that sign painting never could. Of course, I, you know, met a lot of different people, interesting people, other artists, and so on. And then I started to do books.
Right. Then you went into the whole thing of writing books, becoming an author.
Yeah, I've done I've had eight books published, and I was a hot air balloonist for many years.
That was another phase. You were doing hot air balloons for 10 years, right? Yeah. Paintings of balloons and balloons.
I have made over 700 flights in a balloon. Wow. And people always used to say, I've always had that fantasy to fly in a balloon. And then other people say, you ought to do a book. People always say that. You ought to do a book. And so I thought, well, why don't I do a book on ballooning? So I did a book called The Art of Hot Air Ballooning. It was my first book. And couldn't get it published. I couldn't find a publisher. And so finally I self-published it, but it was $50,000 to get the book published.
Wow.
And to raise that, I didn't have $50,000 I wanted to spend. And a friend of mine said, you know what, why don't you sell a page of a book for $1,000? And I said, who's going to spend $1,000 for
what a crazy idea.
And he said, well, I'll buy 2 pages. Wow, okay. And before I knew it, I had 50 pages sold.
Wow.
And people had to wait till the book was published. And then after the book arrived, what do you do with 5,000 books in your garage? And I quickly found out that distributors won't take single published authors. Now maybe that's changed now, but so I started to send the books around to different places, and Gene Shalit on the Today Show reviewed it as one of his gift books of the year.
Oh, it's like Oprah picking up your book.
And so, you know, millions of people saw that at the time. And so that gave me a kickstart, and I'll always be grateful of that. And then after that, it was much easier to get books published.
And then, but then you also went to an abstract stage in your life. You started doing abstract art.
I did. Well, I always did realism, and then some certain things happened in my life, and I just flipped a switch, and I did abstracts for a decade. And I did close to 1,000 of them, and they were very large. Most of them were very large abstracts. And then I went back to the realism when I started to do the books.
You go back to realism. So now you have this program on PBS. How do you approach PBS to say, hey, I have this idea of me painting and traveling, and my wife Sarah is the person who goes and explores the place I'm painting and doing interviews?
You know, getting into PBS was a very tall ladder to climb, because I knew some people in the industry, news industry and so on, but I didn't know really anything about producing a television show. And but I saw some of these other painting shows on television, and I just thought, you know, I think I could probably do as well, and or maybe better. And so Sarah said, why don't you just go buy whatever you need, the cameras, and let's try it.
But that's a learning curve, though.
Yeah. So we did. We produced. So we did 13 episodes, which is it's a series.
Right.
A series. And we started to shop it around, and boy.
So you gave it to them as a complete package.
You have to with PBS, yeah. But there was a big learning curve there, because you know, the color has to be just right, the decibels have to be so right, it has to be closed captioned. So we had to do that all ourselves.
Right.
But and then
and editing, you were doing the editing too?
I do all the editing myself. Sarah chooses the locations usually, and part of the program is me doing a painting, usually about 20 minutes, mostly on location, sometimes
I saw the one of Mulberry lane,
Oh,
a barn.
Mulberry Farm, yeah.
Farm, and that
Yeah.
was great. I mean, this giant barn, you're in front of it. It's overcast,
Yeah.
which you start showing how to paint when it's overcast.
Yeah.
And then Sarah's around talking to the people around this giant barn. And
Sarah's a really good interviewer. So
Yes.
when a lot of the places we go to are just sort of happenstance. Like the barn, we were driving in, I guess it was Wisconsin or somewhere, and said, wow, look at that barn, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
We'd make a nice painting. So we drive in and knock on the door and introduce ourselves, and sometimes they know who we are, sometimes they don't. And so we just set up our cameras and things, and in the instance of the barn or wherever we go, I do about a 20-minute painting, which takes a lot longer than that. A lot of it's edited out.
Right.
And then Sarah will do a 5 to 7 minute interview with the farmer, or if we're at a antique car museum, she'll interview the director of the car museum. Or we've been to Burning Man. We've been to all sorts
Burning
of-
Man, self-expression.
But we've been
art.
all the way from Alaska to Maine to Mexico to the Caribbean. We've done 130 television shows.
Well, it's very interesting because you as an author are then invited to go down to the Titanic at 12,500 feet to paint the Titanic. Well, first as an author of this book, but then you go again a second time to paint the Titanic.
Right.
Down there. What was that like approaching?
Well, it's an interesting, because I had seen the movie and was just enthralled with the movie. I went to the movie theater and saw it twice.
Oh, wow.
And I never do that, but I did with the Titanic. And then the opportunity came, and the RMS Titanic Incorporated was going out on an expedition to retrieve artifacts. And through another friend who was on the expedition, he said, I'm going out on the Titanic. He said, you should go. And I said, I wasn't invited. And he said, give me one of your books. So he gave him this Southern Shores book, which is
It's beautiful.
And I get a call that afternoon and said, you're invited to go out on the Titanic. Would you, if you consider doing a book on the expedition? So that's where this came about.
And the foreword is by James Cameron, wrote the foreword for him. Which is amazing. Now, that first time you went down there, what was it? Was it an emotional experience?
Oh, very much so. You know, I was the 112th person to have ever gone down.
And you're the last human to go down there, aren't you?
No, there
robots have been after you?
Well, the expedition I was on was the last expedition to go on. I was not the last actual person, but I was part of that group. Was the last one. Since then, only ROV, remote operated vehicles, have been down.
Right.
But yeah, it's down 2.5 miles, and you're in a deep sea submersible that's about 25 feet large on the outside, but inside it's about this big with 3 people.
The Apollo
and
11.
We're down there for about 13 hours, and it's kind of like being in an MRI for 13 hours. If you're gonna do it. It really is. You really can't move. But
what was that first image you saw as you got close?
Yeah, well, sometimes the submersibles land here or there, but we happened to land pretty much in front of the bow. Wow. But you couldn't see a thing, and I was on the right, the pilot's in the middle, and there was another co-pilot on the left. And we each have a little viewport about this big. It's 4 inches wide, 4 inches around, but 12 inches thick. Yeah. And we just creep forward, and then all of a sudden, you see this bow. Oh my gosh. That was the first view I ever got of the Titanic. It was just head on. And we got to the very front of it, and we slowly ascended like this. And you could see those railings just like this.
Yes.
And you could see that auxiliary anchor. Wow, that was an exciting time.
Now, you said there were also the collateral of shoes and shoes and shoes.
Well, there's a lot of everything in what they call the debris field. And we picked up, I think it was around 900 artifacts on that expedition.
Now, you also said you picked up a leather bag.
I personally saw a leather bag out my little viewport, and it was brought to the surface, and it would belong to a third-class passenger by the name of William Allen, who obviously had it in his hand when that ship went down.
Wow.
And it had his pants, his shoes, his cigarette lighter, his pencil. I got some pencil lead from it in my studio. The leather preserves things very well. Inside were bus tickets from where he left from. His whole life was in that bag. He was heading toward America, and that was his bag. It was pretty exciting.
Wow.
So,
yeah, go ahead.
well, then the second time I was invited out, I sort of invited myself. I had an idea. I said to the expedition leader, I said, I got an idea. I said, why don't I do a bunch of small little original paintings and a bunch of limited edition prints of the bow of the Titanic.
Right.
And we'll bring those in the deep sea submersible, stuff them in the deep sea submersible, bring them down there, and while we're hovering on the bow, I brought some of my paints and I finished these little paintings, signed them, put a official dive stamp on them. So I have a number of original paintings and limited edition prints that I tell people, you know, a lot of paintings have been done of the Titanic, but these are the only paintings that were done at the Titanic. So they're kind of collector's items.
Great idea. Great idea.
So the expedition leader, he got half of everything, and I got to keep half.
Now,
so that's how that
and there was something crazy you did, which I saw the video, where you suddenly decide what would it be like to jump in the water with the Titanic, and you jump.
Yeah.
And you say when you hit the water, it just took the breath. It was so cold.
Yeah, no one else wanted to do this.
Really? I'm shocked.
And this is the deep sea submersibles are Russian. It's the Russian research vessel Keldysh, and the two submersibles are Mir 1 and Mir 2, the same ones that were in James Cameron's movie. And in fact, I dove with one of the principal photographers of the movie Titanic. And that's how I got the James Cameron forward. Right. So everyone resisted me going, you know, we can't let you jump in this water here. You know, it's I don't know.
Liability or whatever.
And I finally convinced him. I said, I got to do this. I want to feel what it was like. Now we were there in August, and the ship went down in April.
Right.
And we didn't have any icebergs around us.
Right.
But I jumped in that water, and it took my breath away, big time. I just couldn't even speak for a minute or two.
And that's crazy that you're in the water with the Titanic right under you.
Yeah, I wanted to experience
that. You know, it's spooky at the time.
It's a very emotional experience being down there.
Right. So if we wanted to see some of your work, well, your book, I guess we can find on Amazon or
yeah.
It's called The Journey to the Titanic.
Yeah,
and
a lot of books.
You also have a series of books of lighthouses that are beautiful.
Well, thank you. I've done 2 books on lighthouses, book on Florida birds, a couple
You've got about 8 or 9
books.
books out there that are great.
And another book called Mountains in the Mist with a foreword by James A. Michener.
Yes, who was a good friend of yours.
He was a good friend of ours.
If you don't know who Michener was, he wrote a fiction book that took the Pulitzer for fiction in 1948. It was called Tales of the South Pacific, which Roger and Hammerstein do the musical South Pacific based on that book. So, and you were a very good friend of his.
Yeah, both Sarah and I were good friends of his.
Yeah. And
in fact, he used to come. He used this. He was writing a book in St. Petersburg at the time called Recessional, and Michener wrote me a letter and wanted to meet me. He said he would use this book as inspiration when he was writing his book Recessional. And so we met and we became very good friends. And one day he was at my house, my studio, and I said, I'm doing this book on the mountains. I said, would you consider doing the foreword for it? And he said he would. And I said, when do you want to leave? And he says, how about tomorrow? And so we got it. He was 84 or 5 at the time, and we got in my van,
And head up
headed to the mountains for a week.
Wow.
Because he wanted to experience the mountains before he did my forward.
Wow.
So,
that's what makes
was
them
special,
special. Yes. So if we wanted to see your studio, where's your studio located?
We're over by the lighthouse near the tennis courts.
Okay.
But
And there's a sign that says
there's a little sign. Yeah, we're not open. It's not really open to the public,
It's by
but
appointment.
and you can find us, of course, on
the internet.
On the internet.
Yes. And your show on PBS.
Yeah, we're on local here in Jackson. We're on twice a week, Saturday morning at 9:30, and then 9:30.
your fan out there knows.
And then Thursday again at 3:30.
Yeah.
3 or 3:30, something like that.
Well, I thank you.
Yeah,
This
thank
was
you very
wonderful.
much.
Wonderful. When we come back, the Obscure Brothers, one more time. And now I leave you once again with the Obscure Brothers.
Hey, thank you. We're having a good time here, Charlie. Yes, sir. You know, my old friend, we go back a long time, travel down roads that had no end. Yes, my old friend brings joy into my life. I can't imagine my life without my old friend. Yeah, it was another place, in another time. Between the two of us, we barely had a dime. You know, still we laughed, we even cried. Can't believe it's time to say goodbye. 'Cause my old friend, we go back a long time, travel down roads that have no end. Yes, my old friend brings joy into my life. I can't imagine my life without my old friend. Like brothers we did talk, made each other walk the walk, sang our songs in little towns. We shared each other's dreams, redefining love and peace. I can't believe it's time to say goodbye. 'Cause my old friend, we go back a long time, travel down roads that had no end. Yes, my old friend brings joy into my life. I can't imagine my life without my old friend. You know, he believed in brighter days, helping others along the way. He wished every eye would see the light. His hands could rock a child, his smile could heal the hurt. Can't believe it's time to say goodbye. 'Cause my old friend, we go back a long time, travel down roads that have no end. Yes, my old friend brings joy into my life. I can't imagine my life without my old friend. Yes, my old friend, we go back a long time, travel down roads that have no end. Yes, my old friend brings joy into my life. I can't imagine my life without my old friend. I can't imagine my life without my old friend. Thank you so much.
I hope Gamble is watching from up there. And thank you. You guys were magnificent. I want to thank my guests. I have Bruce Horovitz, Roger Bansemer, Melissa Ross, the gentleman here, the Jaguar Legends, everyone who made this show special, especially you people out there. Without you, we don't have a show. So next week, same place, same Batman channel. Catch you next week. Oh, I want to thank the Rain Tree Restaurant. They took care of the needs of Yum Yum for the band. All right. Thank you.